Hey, welcome to the BIA live recruiting chat. I'm your host, Kevin Noon. I'm joined by Joseph Hastings and Griffin Strome. Look at that, bringing everybody in like that. And it's June and a big month for Ohio State recruiting as we've had the opportunity to see a camp and we're going into the first official visit weekend. But before we get into all that, guys, welcome to the show.
Hey, Kevin, how you doing today, man?
Doing great.
Thanks for having me on.
Yep.
How about that fancy countdown was pretty neat there at the top of the show.
I know. I didn't have to build it, so that made it all the best. That's part of the platform I use, and anything they want to give me for free, I'll use. But as we get into things, and let me find the right ticker to show. There we go. Big weekend coming up here. We will talk more specifically here in the second half of the show, but camps. We had the first of Ohio State's 6 recruiting camps. 5 offers came out of that. Joseph has been just burning the phone lines, burning the text messages, getting in touch with a lot of these guys. Griffin and myself were able to get some of the ones that they didn't sneak out the side door. Let me throw it to Griffin first. You're somebody who's never worked recruiting camps. I've been doing this for a long time. Joseph, as a young guy, has been still doing this for a long time as well. We both have been to camps. What were your impressions of what you saw?
Well, yeah. First of all, that was my first Ohio State summer camp I've done. Obviously, not so obviously, but I have done a couple of those Under Armour, underclassmen, top 300 camps over at Obetz the last couple of years now. But those are really my first impressions of what that type of camp really is. In 2019, I was covering Ohio State for the Lantern, but they didn't have us really covering those camps in the summer. So this was really my first experience with that. Obviously, with last year, the camps being canceled and everything. It was fun. It was definitely a long day. I will say that. But there was a lot of kids. There was kind of a wide range of talent there in terms of, some kids are going there, playing for smaller schools. They just want the experience of going to that camp and just, getting better. Other guys, are going there. They're big targets for Ohio State. Sonny Styles, guys that are really high on the recruiting board for Ohio State. And they don't actually necessarily have to even, go to that type of thing. Ohio State's still gonna, be pursuing them, but they still show up and go there. And then it was cool to just see some guys emerge that maybe weren't even necessarily, people that Ohio State, guys are being targeted by Ohio State. Just seeing some guys kind of emerge that weren't expected to necessarily.
Exactly. Joseph, I'll throw it to you. I mean, you've spent probably the last couple of months kind of putting together lists, Excel spreadsheets, everything else. I mean, we think we know who's going to be at camps. Some guys we think are going to be there don't show up. Some that we weren't expecting do show up. Coming out of the camps, what was maybe the biggest storyline for you? I mean, obviously, the biggest thing would have been if somebody committed, and nothing has been made public on that front. But what really stands out most to you from camp?
Yeah, it has to be that Christian Miller not only went to Ohio State for an unofficial visit, but that he camped there too. He worked out in front of Larry Johnson, I should say, and he got to have that one-on-one experience with Coach Johnson. That although we praise the Zoom calls and the virtual recruiting that's been in place over the past 15 months as a result of the dead period, that one-on-one interaction can't be simulated, through FaceTimes and Zooms and all of that. So that was good that Christian was able to not only speak with Coach Johnson face-to-face for the first time, but also work out with him, see what kind of coach he is, learn some techniques from him, see if this is a guy that he can eventually end up playing for, which is something Ohio State's hoping for. And I mentioned that it's an unofficial visit just because he's going to be taking an official to Ohio State later this month. So not only does Ohio State get the first visit of the month, they get the last of the month for Miller, who's one of the top defensive tackle targets. Kevin, it's kind of hard to get a good read on Kristen just because he's so savvy. He's so savvy with the media. He's larger than life personality. He obviously knows he's measured in every single word, every single quote that he gives. But if you're a Buckeye fan, you can't come out of what we saw on Wednesday without thinking that there should be some optimism for Ohio State landing Miller. And other than that, the other camp storylines that stuck out was that a pair of QBs were offered, in the 2023 class. It's going to be interesting to see what they do in 2023 at that position, given the fact that they have pretty much a once-in-a-generational type talent at quarterback coming in Quinn Ewers the year before. So that's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out. But it looks like they still are going to put in that pursuit to get a 2023 quarterback. We'll see what goes on there. And like Griffin mentioned, the fact that Sonny Styles' camp was interesting, because when he tweeted out that he was going to be doing this visit circuit this month and all the visits he was going to take, he didn't mention that he was going to be camping at Ohio State. He had mentioned it for one of the last visits he was going to be taking. So the fact that he got to do that, and he got to work with Coach Combs, Coach Barnes, Coach Washington, and Coach Johnson even, that was really interesting. He worked at all three levels of the defense. And from everything we heard from him, he was, taken aback by the visit. So yeah, overall, a very successful, not necessarily start of the month, but, second day of the month for the Buckeyes here.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is a couple of guys that were committed elsewhere showed up to take their visits, with Gabriel Harris, Florida State commit, and Julian Humphrey, who's a University of Florida commit. Does that mean that both of them are on flip watch? I mean, you never know. It's recruiting, so you never really know what's going to happen until somebody signs. And truthfully, we're seeing guys sign with schools and then enter the portal immediately. So everything, all bets are off. With Gabriel Harris, who really kind of just went through the drills at first. I mean, didn't look like, he wasn't having to put in as much effort as maybe some other guys were. And then he gets into the one-on-ones and the competition, and he just absolutely dominates guys. I mean, nobody's really laying a hand on him really up until the last set of reps when he goes against West Bloomfield lineman Amir Herring. Those were probably two of the best reps that I saw the entire camp session. But Ohio State doesn't offer Gabriel Harris at this point. But if you kind of read between the lines, I think if you decide that you're still really looking around and if you want the offer, there are ways you can kind of let us know that you want the offer, and, an offer could happen. So, we'll see what happens there. I think with Julian Humphrey, I just think he's part of a little tour where he's going around with some other guys, and he went through things. Certainly looks good wearing the scarlet jersey, but I think that if you had to prioritize one versus the other, I think that Harris was maybe on a little bit of a different level than Humphrey. I think Humphrey's just out there having a little bit of fun, unless you disagree, Joseph.
No, I agree with you. To some extent, he was supposed to visit Ohio State over a year ago, but the COVID-19 pandemic shut down that visit. So he's had interest in the Buckeyes for some time, but unfortunately, just due to everything that's been going on, it wasn't able to work out where he got an offer. But he was really high on, everything that he got to experience, working, with the secondary coach, Matt Barnes, and then also Combs, and touring the facilities. He definitely was blown away by the trip. The only question I have is, does Ohio State think that, they can flip him if they offer him? Because you're not going to see the Buckeyes extend an offer if they feel he's solid with Florida, or he's likely to end up elsewhere at the next level other than Ohio State. So this really depends on kind of the feeling they got. Humphrey was thinking that he was gonna get an offer Thursday morning, which was the morning after his visit. So the fact that it didn't come just yet, I don't know if that's a telltale sign. So we'll kind of see with him. They have 3 cornerbacks already committed in this class. That's so the point, yeah. The sense of urgency for getting Humphrey isn't there as, let's say, if only Jair was the only one committed. So we'll see what goes on there. But there's definitely some other positions in the 2022 class to prioritize. And you can see that as they offered Kenneth Grant, that defensive tackle out of Indiana. So, yeah, I'm still a little bit skeptical about Humphrey getting an offer.
I want to jump into the quarterbacks because I think of all the positions, I mean, there certainly were individuals in this position group or that position group or whatever, but if you're putting all this onto a page and say, come to the Ohio State camp and check whatever out, I think the biggest thing in terms of a position group, it would be the quarterbacks. And Ohio State offered two of them with Eli Holstein out of Zachary, Louisiana, and then from the West Coast, Nico Iamaleau, who is a cousin of, and I didn't prepare for this name, but Clemson's current quarterback, the replacement DJ, the replacement for Trevor Lawrence there. DJ's dad was there, who's cousins with Nico's father, who was also there. And then we had quarterbacks like Malachi Singleton, Kenny Minchie, and I think we had a couple others. Chris Parsons was there, 2024 Carson Gordon. There were some guys that could spin it. And, as somebody who doesn't follow the recruiting per se, I'm going to throw it to Griffin first. Just, what were your thoughts of what you saw from the quarterbacks? Because you have to remember, too, they're all, they're throwing to camp participants. So you don't, sometimes some of the disconnects, some were high throws, some were low throws, but sometimes, you just didn't end up with a receiver who maybe ran the right route or something along those lines. But, just the talent that you saw there, Griffin.
Yeah, I think the first two big impressions when you're just looking at that group during camp the other day was first. They both had to do with Nico, and the first one was that he's just so he's listed at 6'6" on Rivals. I know that sometimes those heights don't necessarily match up with once guys actually get on campus and get measured and things like that. But he listed at 6'6" right now. As a class of 2023 guy, and so he just looks just towering over everybody. Really slender right now, obviously. But then even bigger than his height would be just how the ball looks coming off of his hand. I mean, his release, the ball is just flicking off of his wrist. Just a supernatural release. And he just was throwing, laser beams downfield and just a ton of arm strength. His arm really, really wowed, I think, everybody at the camp. And it was just clear to see, that arm talent was just a little bit different, it seemed, compared to most of the other guys that were there. And I think that drew a lot of eyes to him as we were watching the quarterbacks play. And, like you were alluding to, Noon, the completion percentage wasn't necessarily, through the roof in some of those drills just because, the caliber of, receivers and this, that, and the third and route running maybe. And so I thought, Nico wasn't necessarily – pinpoint accurate necessarily 100% of the time, but he really wowed a lot of people with the way that ball was coming off of his hand, and I think you're seeing that reflected in what the reaction was to his camp performance afterwards.
Joseph, I want to throw it to you. You had a chance to catch up with Nico after the fact. You called it a dream interview when we were kind of talking there. I mean, we always love one of those types of interviews to where everything just kind of falls together perfectly. A lot of great quotes or whatnot. What were your impressions talking to Nico post-visit?
Yeah, as someone who, writes these articles all the time, you get a lot of those stale kind of generic quotes, every now and then. But to see someone with a kind of like a fresh perspective on that and, he with the quotes that he had, it really energized the piece. But in terms of what he had to say, he said he was blown away by the offer, especially that it came from Ryan Day, who he called one of the best coaches in the country. He called Ohio State one of the best college football programs in the country, praised Ryan Day and his staff for their development of quarterbacks in the past, specifically Justin Fields. And he also mentioned Dwayne Haskins Jr., so he's definitely been high on not only what Ohio State has accomplished on the field, but more specifically with their quarterback room and their development. And the last thing that he said that really kind of stuck out to me was that, Ohio State's in his top three. He said it right off the bat. He's got about 17 offers right now. So for him having those offers and they're still going to come in, and him being from the West Coast, for him to already say that the Buckeyes are in his top three, that's definitely very encouraging. And, he went on to say that, as this recruitment goes on, they're going to be a top 5 school. So look for the Buckeyes to be a contender there. I did throw out the question to him about the Buckeyes quarterback room, and all the talent that's going to be there now, and that's going to be there in the future with Quinn Ewers arriving. He said, it could play a factor. He still needs to kind of do his research, but it's gonna be something that he evaluates that in the future kind of deal. But right now, as things stand, just based on his interactions with the coaches, what he knows about the history of the school, the recent history of the school, and their successful players at his position, he was just thrilled to get an offer from Ohio State.
Yeah, Ewers may be a generational talent, but I think anywhere that a top player ends up is going to have a stacked room. There just really are not going to be you're a top team because you have a top quarterback. We've seen, we certainly have seen teams that have had more of a game manager there or whatnot, but I think here in portal days, it's going to be even more difficult because you're not going to sit there and have places that are going to have 4 or 5 quarterbacks in the room that all could immediately just step in and go. I think that if you fall to third on the depth chart, your time somewhere is going to be short. So, it certainly does create a lot of questions on how you're going to maintain a quarterback room. And I don't know if any of us necessarily have any answers because every situation is going to be a little bit different. And, people are already around Buckeye Nation are like, well, picking winners and losers, he's going to stay and he's going to go. And I'm not going to dignify that by naming any names because we don't know anything at this point. So that's not fair to anybody. But, it certainly is going to show the importance of year after year after year after year that you're going to have to make sure that you go out and get a quarterback because you're not going to be able to stockpile them. And, unless either of you guys disagree with my statement, and I doubt it.
Yeah, I think there is a little bit of concern that a quarterback may leave, and hit the portal. There's always going to be that concern there. But if you have C.J. Stroud and then Kyle McCord and then Quinn Ewers for the next few years, maybe 2023 isn't the year, but 2024 you can kind of sell top quarterback on coming in and waiting a year and then getting their chance. So we talked about this last time. Just continue recruiting the top guys. You're a top program in the country. You're competing for championships, and you shouldn't set the bar low just because you're nervous that you may not be able to land somebody. You have to continue to set the bar high. That's what they're doing with wide receivers. That's what they're doing with other positions that they're recruiting well at. Defensive backs. So that's something that I wouldn't say that they're going to just aim for low 4 stars just so they can make sure they get a quarterback every cycle, 2023 or something like that. I think you still need to aim high, and that's what they did with this week.
Yeah, I think every so often you may see a class that has 2 quarterbacks. Maybe you kind of go out for somebody who, you never want. You got to be careful how you phrase it. But maybe somebody who isn't as much of an immediate plug and play type of guy. Somebody who is a little bit more developmental. But that has to be your second quarterback because if you get into a cycle of where that becomes your first quarterback in the class, somebody gets hurt, 2 guys transfer or whatever, and then you're the ones having to go search the portal to find somebody. And then that ends up becoming a bit of a stopgap type of situation. So you have to lead. You can't follow in this situation. Is at least my opinion. I want to touch quickly on Eli Holstein, who Sam Spiegelman for the network caught up with. He said all the right things, was very excited about getting the Ohio State offer. As I said, he's out of Zachary, Louisiana, 6'3", 210, kind of has that prototypical size. Rivals.com has them listed as a pro style. We don't get to see these guys necessarily run. So, and it's not like they're putting guys under heavy pressure or whatever. I thought he threw a pretty good ball as well. Agree, Griffin?
Yeah, you said prototypical, and that's kind of what my thoughts were on him in general as well. He just had, very prototypical mechanics. He had a good build. He was solid. We did get to see the quarterbacks do a little bit of, throwing on the run type of thing with Corey Dennis kind of simulating some pressure. So we got to see some of that as well. But yeah, I thought he looked good as well. I didn't think his release and things of that nature were quite as, jump off the field at me as, a Nico was, but I still I thought that Eli looked very good as well. And it was interesting to see him kind of talking to DJ Uliung. I'm not even going to try to do the last name. He was talking to the contingent of family that was with Nico afterwards, and he was like, I can't wait to compete with him moving forward. It's going to be really fun competing with him. So that was just kind of cool to kind of overhear that kind of behind the scenes look at a couple guys that are going to be, in the same class and potentially competing in the future.
I'll jump in with one more name, and then I'll give Joseph an opportunity to wrap up quarterbacks, and that was Malachi Singleton out of Kennesaw, Georgia. Same town as Justin Fields, not the same school. Different type of build. 6 foot 220 is what we have him listed at. He may have been even a little bit more stocky than that. I mean, he was we sit there and we can go back to the days of Troy Smith. Was he 5'11"? Was he 6 foot or whatever? And where that was in terms of you had to be 6 foot to be a quarterback. I truly believe Malachi is 6 foot, but I mean he is stout and he threw a nice ball, but he didn't get the offer at this point, but certainly somebody who seems to be on their radar. I'm looking forward to an opportunity to really start breaking down quarterback film, but put up some impressive skills when I had the chance to see him. But this won't be the only camp that we see quarterbacks at. They're going to be quarterbacks at all 5 camps still coming up. Let me throw those dates up there on the scroll. But it's going to be hard to top maybe some of the arm talent that they brought in this group because. And I haven't even really talked about Carson Gordon, a 24 quarterback. I know there was another 24 quarterback out of somewhere out of the South. The name is escaping me. Maybe as Joseph picks it up, I can dig that name up. But a good QB group.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's going to be interesting to see how 2023 is recruited when it comes to quarterbacks. Just, given the presence of Quinn Ewers there, you run into that tough, that tough, trying to find the words for it, but you run into where you put yourself into between a rock and a hard place here. We have all this great talent in the quarterback room currently, but that may dissuade some guys in the 2023 class from committing. But you need a quarterback in each cycle, in my opinion, in order to be the leader of the class. I've seen recruiting classes that don't have a quarterback, and it doesn't necessarily go as well as it could have if they had a QB committed just to be the leader there, especially the leader on offense, recruiting wide receivers, recruiting tight ends, recruiting offensive linemen. You need somebody, and I know Quinn isn't necessarily that CJ Hicks type of guy. He's admitted to it, but at least having someone like him in this class, influences a Caleb Burton to join alongside him, and influences a Keon Graves later on to team up with him. And he's also been in some offensive linemen's ears. So I fall into the mindset where you do want to get a quarterback in the 2023 class, preferably before the year ends, just so you can, maybe have like 7 or 8 commitments and then really start off 2022 on a good note. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what they do when it comes to 2023.
The last name was KJ Jackson, a 2024 out of Montgomery, Alabama. He hit me up on social. I'm sure I saw him throw. I'm going to need to kind of go back and try and figure out who he was just in order to kind of replay the reps through my mind. But, Texas or Busted jumps in with, his thoughts on the quarterback situation. And I don't want to turn this into strictly, into like a football season chat. This one's more of a recruiting chat. But until we see Stroud, Miller, McCord, and whoever gets those snaps, whoever's there, it's tough to be like, well, Quinn Ewers is the heir apparent. When he gets in 2022, they're going to hand it right off to him. Joseph and I certainly had the chance to see Quinn throw during a throwing session during our Southern Swing. We were in the indoor facility at South Lake Carroll. Kid's impressive, let me tell you. I've seen some quarterbacks through the years or whatnot. Going back to my high school days, I saw Todd Marinovich. That's how old I am. So, I don't know. I think it may be a little bit premature at this point to say that, but I don't think Texas or Busted is far off from where a lot of Ohio State fans' mindset is right now. So far from an outlier. I think that there are plenty of people that feel that way, but I'll throw a slow your roll with much respect. A respectful slow your roll out on that one. Fellas?
Yeah, it's tough because you see Quinn, like we know how talented Quinn is. Everyone who's been following recruiting knows that, but is up until this like last week when, he started going out to camps and really showcasing his skill set in front of pretty much the country. He's blown up on Twitter. He's blown up. I was watching a program on Fox Sports 1 called First Things First, and they talked about him multiple times. It's kind of been this past week with camps opening up that he's really jumped into the national spotlight, and I can see why there's a lot of intrigue around him and a desire that as soon as he steps on campus next year, he's going to be quarterback one. In my opinion, there are some things that need to be cleaned up. I think at times that he's so talented, his arm strength is so off the charts that maybe the fundamentals aren't there on every single play. There have been some times where I've seen him fading away and throwing a pass, and it kind of reminds you of Patrick Mahomes or Aaron Rodgers. But I don't think Ohio State can go wrong. I think it's a great problem to have. I should say like that they're going to either have Kyle McCord, C.J. Stroud, Jack Miller, and then, Quinn Ewers. I think that's actually a really good problem for the Buckeyes to have.
And I'll just jump in and say, talk about, him blowing up on social media the past couple of weeks and whatnot. I've seen a ton of things saying the next Mahomes, this and that, comparing the sidearm throws, the different arm angles and all that stuff like that. It's really hard to compare a guy to someone like Patrick Mahomes at this stage. But I'll also say, I've been saying for a while now, Quinn Ewers just having that bleached mullet in general is really a stroke of marketing genius, in my opinion, because with the NIL stuff, coming into fruition now, I feel like there's so many things you can do with that if that's like his trademark thing going forward. And so that I'm just interested to see, and I feel like his star power just grows just from having the mullet in the first place. So I'm kind of interested to see how that's going to play out as well.
I'm going to throw one more thing out and then let Griffin wrap up, and then Joseph and I will take it the rest of the way home. For those of you who follow our show, Griffin, excellent team writer guy. I dragged him onto the show because he was with me at the camp, and I just wanted to have another set of eyes to talk here. We talked about Kristen Miller, the defensive lineman out of Cedar Grove High School outside of Atlanta. Joseph and I had the opportunity to speak to him during Southern Swing as well. He had his little one-on-one workout, so to speak, with Larry Johnson as part of his unofficial. Again, it's drill work. You're going through a lot of agility, some things where you can kind of measure hands and things along those lines. He certainly did go through other camp-related activities as well. He didn't run the full gambit, but we did get the opportunity to see Larry working with him. What were your impressions of what you saw?
Oh, I thought he looked great. I thought he could fit right in almost, with the type of guys that Larry Johnson has in that room right now. He looks like a quintessential, Larry Johnson defensive lineman. And I thought he looked very impressive going through the drills. Obviously, his interviews with the media afterwards were equally impressive, if not more so, with some of the one-liners and quotes he was throwing out there and the analogies he was making. But yeah, I think, that seems like a perfect fit for Larry Johnson, a perfect fit for this Ohio State defense.
Sorry, couldn't find the button I was looking for there to take you out of the single shot. I was very impressed. He is such a character. If he's half the football player that he is a character, they're going to be planting a tree for him in Buckeye Grove if he ends up at Ohio State. But I truly believe the football is there too with him. But somebody who's going to profit on NIL. Let me tell you. I don't even, outside of Buckeye Grove, I don't have any products to sell, but I may develop one just to be able to work with Kristen Miller because he's that impressive.
Yeah, the quote that he gave about comparing Larry Johnson to a Lamborghini was just brilliant. To do that on the spot. I'm not going to read the full quote out there, but he essentially said that Lamborghinis don't need to do commercials because what Lamborghinis can do. It carries that weight on its own, whereas Kias and Hondas and all these other car companies need to. And he compared Larry Johnson to a Lamborghini because Larry Johnson doesn't need to, pitch himself, and compete with other defensive line coaches because pretty much no other coach has his type of resume. Top three draft picks at the pass rusher position in the past few years. There's no other coach that can compete with him. And he's also put other players into NFL as well, in the interior of the defensive line. Christian's really appealed by that. Although he's listed as a defensive tackle, they're going to move him around. They're going to be willing to move him around inside and outside. So, I just he's one of those kids that just brings a lot of energy to the interviews. It's hard doing, reading a piece about him because you really need to see it. He has this energy to him that most recruits that I've covered just, don't have because, we're talking about 15, 16, 17-year-old kids. I don't even have that type of personality at this stage in my life. And, I've done interviews before, I've done these type of shows, but he has a personality. He's going to be very successful off the field, that's for sure. And, based on the looks of it, I only got to see a few clips, but he did pretty well at the camp and should have a bright future on the field as well.
Absolutely. Griffin, I want to throw it back to you one final time. Any other things that really stood out from the camp before we kind of turn the page to talk about the official visit weekend and all that stuff that Joseph and I spend hours and hours and hours talking about offline?
I guess I would just say it was my second time getting to see Sonny Styles in person, just to move around a little bit. I didn't go outside necessarily to see, in depth what he was doing outside because I stayed inside of the warmth, so to speak, of the indoor facility there at the Woody. But he just, I was watching his highlights the other day too, and that dude just looks, like a super athlete, and just, the possibilities with him could be endless, if he comes to Ohio State and what role they might specifically use him in. I'll also say just because I'm, obviously a team writer, I was just interested in seeing, the actual, members of the team that were popping out during the camp because we haven't actually gotten to, be around them in that proximity for so long because of COVID and everything. It was fun to get to watch Kyle McCord and CJ Stroud. We're doing some work after camp was done, throwing balls to Chris Olave and Marvin Harrison Jr. And Jackson Smith and Jigba. Those guys getting some reps in after the practice or the camp sessions were over. That was fun because we don't usually get to see a whole lot of that either. It was a fun time. We got a lot more of these to come, and I'll be at all of them. So I'm looking forward to getting some eyes on some more of these guys and talking some more recruiting with you guys in the future.
And if Ohio State's SID, Jerry Emig is watching, I didn't watch any of that. I turned around. I didn't. No, looking at the players, fellas. No, but it was. I agree. And I meant to kind of touch upon that. Just seeing some of the work that the guys were putting in at the conclusion of everything was very impressive. But Griffin, I want to thank you for being part of the show. I'm going to dump you out here in a second, and we will have you back for I'm sure more of these shows as camps continue on through the month.
All right, thanks.
Oops, I cut him a little too quick, but he'll forgive me. So, Joseph, I'm going to bring on our official visit ticker now. There we go. Big weekend coming up here. Bennett Christian just tweeted a minute ago, a location pin. Kai Stokes just landed here in Columbus. Let me throw a retweet on that. The gentlemen are getting on to campus now. They're in town. A big number of commits and certainly a big number of non-committed guys. What excites you most about all of this?
Yeah, what excites me most is that we're having official visits again. It's been a long time since we've been able to do this, well over a year. And, I'm just looking forward to it, seeing how these kids enjoy themselves. It's going to be majority of the prospects on campus are going to be commits. But I'm still interested in seeing, what they have to say. What does Keon Graves think about visiting twice now and, being able to meet the coaches in person? How did this visit compare to the one he took right before he committed? With Bennett Christian, he did the same thing. He took a self-guided visit last year as well. So I'm really interested in seeing how this type of trip compares to the self-guided visits they took. What were some of the different things that they got to see? And then also the targets as well. They're going to be journeying down, and, you have Amari Abor and, Xavier Nwankpa and Zion Branch, trio of Rivals 100 guys, Zach Rice, a 5-star offensive lineman. So there's just a lot of excitement. I think, Ohio State fans would have loved for CJ Hicks to be taking the official this weekend, but he's still going to be there, and he's going to be taking his official in 2 weeks now. So the fact that he's able to make some time aside, even though he has a track meet, I think that's really huge for the Buckeyes. But just as we said last week, it's an overall exciting weekend. I don't think they could have kicked off their first official visit weekend on a better note, in my opinion. This was a really strong group that they're bringing in.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think that guys could sit there and maybe look at the weekend of the 25th and say, well, there are more uncommitted players that weekend than this weekend. But I mean, when you look at Pride and then Wakpa and Branch, I mean, those are three big guys in the secondary. You look at Abor. I mean, he's important. I mean, George Fitzpatrick. Does anybody know anything about him? He doesn't do interviews. I mean, I'm not going to say he's a JTT per se, but I mean, he's of everybody on that official visit list, he's the one I probably know the least about. I mean, just based on the fact that he doesn't really get into the whole game.
Yeah, so I actually just texted George. If you saw me looking down at my phone a couple of times, I was texting George. We're going to set up an interview after the official visit is concluded. I believe he took a self-guided visit earlier this year, but to Ohio State. But obviously this is going to be completely different just based on the fact that he gets to interact with the coaches. And I'm interested in seeing what he has to say as well. Just like you said, he doesn't do any interviews. He doesn't talk to the media that much. So I'm a little bit skeptical if this is going to pan out or not. But, I'm looking forward to hearing what he has to say, because obviously Ohio State needs offensive linemen. They just need prospects in the trenches in general, with only one committed on either side of the ball. So, you have Zach Rice coming in and Amari coming in, and then George Fitzpatrick as well. I want to see if they can get some momentum going there. I don't necessarily know if this weekend is going to lead to a commitment, though, in the following days. I had someone ask me a question, when do you expect some commitments to pop? I just don't know if it's going to happen. Based off what I had heard about Xavier and Nwankpa wanting to push it to January, and then him confirming that he's going to take officials in the fall, unless, this visit just completely wows him and his family, and he feels like this is the only place for him. I don't know if they're going to be able to get any commitments, but we'll see. Nick James, as you can see on the scroll below, he's a name to pay attention to, because Ohio State is, in my opinion, in his top three. If they give him the green light, does he decide to become the first defensive lineman committed? There's just a lot of interesting storylines going around here. So I definitely believe there's a lot to pay attention to. But you had mentioned it before, that last weekend of the month is going to be the one where it gets really exciting. And, coming off the heels of JTT taking his official visit, and you're going to have a double-digit targets on campus. That's the one I'm really paying attention to. But who knows? This one could absolutely open up the floodgates.
I want to ask a question to you. And, again, I don't know if you can answer it or I can answer it, but something to be said about once the dam kind of breaks. And I mean, Ohio State is already sitting with 12 guys in a class that could get up to 23, 25. I mean, we really don't know. The 85 is the number. I'm never really that concerned about, are they 22, 23, 25? Ohio State's not going to go over 85 and find out what the penalty is for having too many guys. And I know we're in kind of a little bit of a different world with super seniors and the COVID exemption, but do you think that potentially if a guy or two do pop a little earlier than expected, that it could lead to a run, because there are only so many spaces in the class and you're not playing best player available? I mean, you've got to fill needs or whatever. So could something like that lead to maybe a run on these spots to get while the getting's good?
I honestly think it depends on who commits when answering that question. If it's Xavier and Nwankpa, I can absolutely see the floodgates opening, just because he's kind of reminds me of that CJ Hicks type of recruiter, and Deshaun McCullough. He has really great relationships with prospects all across the country, just based on his 7-on-7 work and the big personality that he is. I could absolutely see him coming in and opening up the floodgates and really getting some prospects to join alongside him. But, if it's someone who maybe isn't as big of a name, like a Nick James, like a George Fitzpatrick, does that really open up the floodgates? Does that really entice some guys to come? I think your question is, I would say yes to your question for sure is, if it's along the defensive line, if you see a couple of defensive linemen pop, and then, some guys start feeling, hey, my spots may be limited, or even on the offensive side of the ball, the offensive line, if they feel like their spots may be threatened because they're only going to take one or two more after somebody commits, then you may see some, commit earlier than expected. Maybe somebody who is waiting till the season or waiting till signing day decides to pop beforehand. But this is really tough to predict. There's no player that I can look at this list right now besides maybe Neil Wagner or Dallin Hayden, just in terms of official visitors this month, where I feel for sure that Ohio State's going to land them over the next few weeks. So it honestly depends on who that surprise guy could be. Could it be a Zach Rice? I doubt it. It would be completely unexpected, but that could absolutely open up the floodgates too, just based on the type of talent that he is. So we'll see. It's really hard to predict at this time, but 51 official visitors this month, as we were told last week, that's huge for the Buckeyes. That's just absolutely a big number. They only expect 40 or so or 50 in a year in general. To get that in a month, that's big time. So it's going to be a marathon, not a sprint for the staff. It's going to be a lot of 2-3 hours nights of sleeping for them, but I think they're up for the challenge.
Yeah, exactly. And again, I think we'll also see, if some commitments do happen in terms of 2022, I think you could see later officials fall off the board because they're full of the position, or maybe a kid's like, well, I'm not going to compete now at that situation. I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but I think you have 51 at that point. You could sit there and see a couple of people fall off, but I think you could also sit there and see recently offered Kenneth Grant. Maybe he comes in and he takes an official visit in June if he's green-lighted and that's approved to do one at that point. I mean, they certainly have some opportunities for that. I mean, the offensive lineman out of Central Ohio that came in, and he doesn't have his offer yet, but he took his unofficial. I'm drawing a blank on his name off the top of my head.
Carter Smith. I mean, could he come in June? So that 51 number is going to be very, very fluid, but one way or the other, it's going to be a lot. I had a chance to pull Mark Pantoni aside at the camp, and I said, well, 2 days in and you're still upright. He's like, oh, I got this. And if you know Mark, that's Mark. That's quintessential Pantoni right there. But yeah, he's certainly not going to be getting a lot of rest. And, thankfully for him, his kids are getting a little bit older. I couldn't imagine trying to do this with newborns who aren't sleeping through the night. You talked a little bit about, that you'll believe that you'll get the George Fitzpatrick interview when you get him on the phone or get the text messages from him. I drew Quinn Ewers, so I'm supposed to talk to him after the camp. And, I think that everybody just really gravitates towards him. And is it the blonde mullet? Is it the nickname of QB1? Is it being the number one overall rated recruit by Rivals.com for class of 2022? Is it, an engaging personality? I think it's all of it. I mean, Quinn doesn't talk to us per se. And by us, I mean just the media. When we had a chance to talk to him on Southern Swing, you could tell it was not his favorite thing to do, but he's done a round of interviews now, but, people have had to go down there to get him or whatnot. But, what do you think the impact of having a guy like Quinn Ewers on this visit is going to mean, whereas somebody like maybe CJ Hicks is a little bit more boisterous and outgoing or whatnot, but having Quinn Ewers, who's kind of that figurehead, you always kind of, surround your quarterback. And, just from what we talked about in the first half hour, just the amount of hoopla around him. Yeah, Quinn isn't somebody who speaks a lot. And he even admitted it, that the interview that we did with him wasn't necessarily his cup of tea. And, we've heard from other commits that he's not the most vocal guy in the group chats or anything like that. But guess what? His actions speak for themselves. And his actions are, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the country, not just regardless of class. He could step right into college this summer, in my opinion, and compete for a starting job. So, Quinn is somebody who's, his caliber of play speaks for itself, and that's going to attract some guys. They're going to look at him and be like, even if you're on the defensive side of the ball, like Omari is from Duncanville, Texas, you're going to gravitate to him just based on the type of player he is, the type of leader that he could be in the class. because anytime that he sends a text message to a recruit, that carries some weight. And we heard that when we were in Texas. You made a trip. You and I made the trip, and I had also went to Dallas the month before in March, and people were just speaking about Quinn Ewers. Jalen Early was talking about him. A couple of other players were talking about him. That even him sending just one text, resonated with them just based on the type of player he is. So not only are they going to get him on campus for this official visit weekend, they're going to get him the weekend after, as he said, to take an unofficial on June 11th. So that's huge for the Buckeyes that, he's dedicated. It really shows his commitment. If people had doubted it before, I don't see how you can continue doubting how locked in he is with the class, that he's going to take an unofficial and then an unofficial after the weekend he takes his official. So yeah, he's just somebody that people gravitate to. Griffin mentioned the mullet, and he shoots deer and puts Buckeye hats on it. I mean, he has his own personality and his own type of way. So I think it's huge that they're getting him on campus this weekend.
Let's wrap up this visit weekend, at least the officials. I mean, obviously they've got players coming in and out of campus every single day, it really seems like, or whatnot. I don't think either of us are of the mindset that we're going to be talking about a commitment on Sunday, but you never know. I mean, never thought that the world was going to shut down for a year and a half either. So, it just shows we don't know what we don't know. But a lot of optimism around there. I mean, what do you think we're going to be talking about come Monday or Tuesday? We're going to try and come back with another one of these shows at the end of next week. I think Fridays seem to be working out pretty well for them because we can wrap up camps and preview official visit weekends. What do you think the biggest story is that we're going to be talking about coming out of this weekend?
Yeah, I think you're just going to hear about a bunch of prospects raving about Ohio State. They're going to be saying that they set the bar high. And that was something that Mark Pantoni said to the media last week. They want to set the tone early. They want to set the precedent for what other official visits should be. And if those official visits don't live up to Ohio State, then those prospects will know what school to choose. So I think you're going to see a lot of, a lot of guys happy, satisfied with the visits that they took. You're going to see a lot of commitments. Committed prospects just reaffirm that they're locked in with the Buckeyes and, continue to say that they're going to get some more booms. That's another thing I think you're going to see. You're going to see a bunch of boom bat signals. Those signals aren't necessarily always for, hey, this guy's going to commit tonight, or this guy's going to commit in a day. Sometimes it could be, in a week or two, but I think you're going to see a lot of those hints on social media. Here's the thing. The staff has had a busy couple of days to start off the month, but they're ready for this. They're ready for this official visit weekend. They knew this is the one that they kind of have to knock out the park, along with the final weekend as well as JTT on June 18th. But this is a huge weekend that it's going to be all hands on deck. I believe that was the phrase used last week with the media. And so I think you're just going to hear a lot of prospects, a lot of targets who take their visits, just be absolutely over the moon with how the experience went. And one thing I'm also interested in doing, and I'm going to do it, is a parent perspective piece where I talk with the parents of some of these targets. I already have a few set up, and that's something that I'm always interested in, because as much as this is all about the kids themselves and what they think about the schools, you also have to sell the parents on it, specifically the academic side of things. That's what a lot of parents, a lot of family members really focus in on. So that's something I'm also interested in seeing. What do the parents think about Ohio State? Name, image, and likeness. How much did that play a role in the coaches' pitches to these recruits? So there's going to be a lot of storylines that I'm going to be paying attention to, but I'm more interested in seeing how did these recruits think about what did they think about the visit? How many boom bat signals do we get? And also, what did the parents think?
I'm going to jump off of the visit weekend. I mean, there's so much more we could talk about. I mean, we certainly could talk about 23s and other guys that are going to be around. We'll kind of talk about that coming out of it. But I would be remiss if our last thing we didn't talk about were some of the other official visits or the other offers that came out of camp. And, we talked about the two quarterbacks. Kenneth Grant picked up, class of 22 out of Indiana, defensive lineman, big guy. I mean, moved really well for his size. You saw him, you're like, there's something there. And I felt validated that the staff agreed with me to the point of offering the kid. And then a couple of defensive backs with, help me here, Christian Gray and
Keon Lee.
Yeah, Keon Lee, who's the teammates with Kristen Miller. Just kind of your thoughts on just the other last couple of offers that went out as we take it down the home stretch.
Yeah, and I should correct myself. It was Keon Lee, out of Georgia. I talked with someone about this earlier today, just how great it is for these recruits to have the opportunity to showcase their skill sets in front of the coaches in person, because one of the things that we were concerned about with the dead period potentially being extended again, which, just seemed like a possibility based on how many times it was extended, was that some of these recruits like a Kenneth Grant, or Carter Smith wouldn't be able to put their skill set on display in front of the coaches in person. So it was, just really great to see that Grant got to go out there and earn an offer, because I don't know if he gets one if the dead period was pushed back and if there were no camps allowed. Julian Humphrey as well, just, another potential offer down the line. That's one that we're going to be paying attention to, just based on kind of how they feel with their cornerback room, how they feel about their chances of flipping Humphrey. But overall, just based on, I wasn't able to, attend the camp and, see them in person, but I think that it was great that Ohio State got to see these guys and offer some recruits that maybe they wouldn't have if they didn't get to see them in person.
Yeah, exactly. And we had plans to get Joseph up here for a couple of camps, and just in the way that the world works, they weren't gonna let media in, so it didn't make any sense for Joseph to come stand outside of the camp as we waited for kids to go in and out, and then we canceled the ticket, and lo and behold, they opened the camp. So it is what it is, and that's just how you have to roll with the punches here. That's what you got to do. But and I think we've kind of covered everything there, unless you have any final thoughts. I mean, we're closing in a little over 50 minutes here. We're going to be doing these weekly through June, just to get us through all this, to kind of give you an idea. If you're not a member of Buckeye Grove, jump in. We got a promo, Visits 2021. You'll get free trial through, I believe it's August 10th, 2021. You're going to get all of your coverage from camp. I mean, you're going to get all that premium information. You're going to get access to the Horseshoe Lounge. Why not? What do you have to lose? So if you have any questions, email me at kevin@buckeyegrove.com. But use the promo code Visits 2021. Take advantage of that free trial. Check us out on our dime. Come check us out, and we're sure you're going to stick around. But any final thoughts, Joseph?
Yeah, just go ahead and check Buckeye Grove. We've put out a lot of stories since the start of the month, whether it's camp visitors, unofficial visitors like CJ Hicks, Gabe Powers, Luke Montgomery. We just have a bunch of stories, and we're going to continue to have a bunch of stories, a ton of content through this entire month. And especially with the official visits, we're going to do some very creative stuff that I'm looking forward to. So yeah, jump on board. It's free. What's better than free? You mentioned it at the top of the show that they provided you the countdown for free. We all love free stuff. You can see on the scroll below, just email Kevin and get yourself a free membership. Let's do it. Absolutely.
That sounds good to me. And, I want to thank everybody who's jumped in to watch us live, everybody who's going to watch us on the replay, everybody who's jumped in on the chat. I mean, don't be shy. Be sure to jump in with your questions. We certainly love to answer them. We can listen to ourselves talk about, whatever, but we want to answer your questions. That's the purpose of these live shows. We do the podcast as well. So it's all good. But I'm just sitting there seeing some late comments coming in, but we're gonna turn this show off. I mean, about the amount of Ohio State football content, it's an Ohio State football show. It's what it is. We're not going to be talking about Michigan or Alabama or Clemson. This is an Ohio State show, so that's what we're going to talk about. We certainly have the opportunity to talk about some basketball when that's warranted. We can bring Jake Spiegel in for that. But for now, I want to thank Joseph. I'm Kevin. You've been watching Live with BuckeyeGrove.com, part of our BIA podcasting series. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll be in touch with you very soon.
Thank you all.